Most people assume that in war the decisive factor is steel, fuel, or manpower. Yet again and again, it has been something far quieter that determined endurance: sugar. Not luxury sugar shipped in sacks, but the raw caloric base that kept armies moving through winter. There was once a crop in Eastern Europe and across Russia that required no spraying, tolerated brutal frost, survived neglect, and produced fruit sweeter than grapes. It could be dried, fermented, stored, and eaten straight from the branch. It fed peasants, soldiers, and entire rural economies. And then, within a few decades of the 20th century's upheavals, it was uprooted, sidelined, and in many places deliberately forgotten. The story of why this tree was buried economically and sometimes literally reveals far more about industrial agriculture, wartime logistics, and political control than most standard histories of the era ever mention. After the war, however, the momentum toward industrial agriculture only intensified. Mechanization, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides promised predictability. Standardized varieties of wheat, maize, and sugar beet fit neatly into economic models. Hardy, unsprayed trees, though biologically robust, did not maximize yield per hectare in the narrow way planners measured productivity. Cold-resistant grapes suffered a similar fate in many regions. Traditional varieties that survived severe winters without spraying were often replaced with higher yield but chemically dependent cultivars. Over time, knowledge eroded. What had once been common rural understanding, how to dry mulberries for winter, how to propagate hardy cuttings, how to integrate trees into field systems, became marginal. By the late 20th century, in many areas, people no longer recognized the strategic value of these trees. Some were cut down simply because their fruit stained pavement or attracted birds. The deeper issue was not taste or even yield, it was control and doctrine. Modern states learned during total war that food supply is a weapon. Centralization allowed rationing, allocation to military priority, and control over civilian populations. A decentralized landscape of fruiting trees reduced that leverage. It offered autonomy at the household level. In stable times, that autonomy seemed inefficient. In crisis, it was insurance. Military doctrine quietly absorbed related lessons. Cold weather operations planning after the Second World War increasingly emphasized secure supply lines and stockpiled rations rather than local sourcing. Scorched earth tactics during retreats, seen on the Eastern Front, often included destroying orchards alongside grain fields. The recognition was implicit: perennial food sources could sustain resistance. From a survivalist perspective, the buried history of the mulberry and its resilient counterparts offers a different model of preparedness. Annual crops depend on stability seed supply, fertilizer, labor, and predictable seasons. Perennials represent accumulated time. Each year they grow stronger roots. They require patience up front, but demand little afterward. They cannot be easily disrupted by a single failed harvest. There is also a cultural dimension. In pre-industrial villages, children climbed mulberry trees in summer, elders dried fruit for winter, and knowledge passed quietly across generations. But food resilience shapes morale, mobility, and decision-making. An army that can supplement rations locally reduces strain on logistics. Civilians with access to perennial food sources are less dependent on state distribution and more capable of enduring occupation or blockade. These are not romantic notions, they are logistical realities. Why then did they bury it? Partly because industrial agriculture delivered measurable gains in the short term, partly because centralized control suited modern states, and partly because once knowledge is not actively maintained, it fades quickly. A tree that produces for decades is only valuable if someone remembers why it was planted. In recent years, interest in hardy, unsprayed varieties has begun to return in certain regions, not out of nostalgia, but from renewed awareness of climate volatility and supply chain vulnerability. For serious students of history, this story underscores a broader pattern. Technological progress often sidelines resilient traditions that do not fit prevailing economic models. War exposes the weaknesses of such decisions, but post-war optimism tends to repeat them. The tension between efficiency and resilience runs through 20th century conflicts as surely as any frontline. Understanding why a tree sweeter than grapes, needing no spraying and surviving any winter, was uprooted forces us to reconsider how we define progress. It asks whether yield per hectare is the only metric that matters, or whether durability across generations should carry equal weight. History is often told through weapons and leaders, but endurance, real endurance, has always depended on quieter systems beneath them. Remembering that matters. If you value this kind of in-depth historical analysis that looks beyond battles to the foundations of survival, subscribe to Iron Age Instincts and share this video with others who want to understand what history often leaves unsaid.